So this is episode 1, and this experience is about dyspraxia. So let's kick this off with a story concerning dyspraxia. So I'm walking in the city, I'm breathing the beautiful Welsh air, I'm avoiding the seagulls because in this city they're really aggressive, I'm absorbing my environment, and then I walk into a popular bookshop. And as I go through the doors, I go into the smart thinking section. Then I go to the self-help section. And then I go to the philosophy section. And then finally, I look in the art section. And this is a pleasurable experience in an existential type way. But then it dawned on me, how many books are there in this bookshop that address dyspraxia? How many books are there in this bookshop that address dyspraxia? And I think that answers many questions with regards to the awareness of dyspraxia. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to answer some questions concerning dyspraxia. Now, the first question to me is obvious, and that question is, what is dyspraxia? And here I present to you an exercise. Ask people in your community and ask people in your family, what is dyspraxia? So ask people in your community and ask people in your family, what is dyspraxia? Now, why would you do this? You would do this because this would ascertain whether your community understands dyspraxia. So here's my take for what it's worth. Dyspraxia is a motor coordination issue that can be broken down into 2 phases. Phase 1, the motor coordination issue. And phase 2, we have the secondary issues such as perception, organization, thought, speech, memory, etc. Let's repeat that. So we have phase 1, the motor coordination issue. And phase 2, we have the secondary issues such as perception, organization, thought, speech, memory, etc. So let's give an example of a motor coordination issue. So let's take John. Who's John? John's a smartly dressed businessman and a fitness enthusiast. But John can't ride a bike. This is a motor coordination issue. And now let's take Jane. Who's Jane? She's an accountant, she's a mother, she's a part-time fashion designer, but she struggles holding a knife and fork. Now this is a motor coordination issue. So now let's give some examples of secondary issues. So now let's take Jack. Who's Jack? He's a construction worker, but Jack can't remember to lock the door. This is a memory issue concerning the secondary issues or the secondary phase of dyspraxia. Now let's take Sally. Who's Sally? Sally's a performer. She's a media marketer. But Sally's room is always untidy. Now this would be an organizational issue concerning the secondary issues or the second phase of dyspraxia. So that to me is a brief breakdown of dyspraxia. So now let's move on to something else. So another important question would be, how many people are affected with dyspraxia? So according to some statistics, dyspraxia affects up to 6% of the population. Now I'm not sure how accurate this figure is, but let's stick with this as a premise. So to understand how many people have dyspraxia in the UK, let's first ask the question, how many people are in the UK? Now according to Google, that's 67 million. So that would mean if we use this 6% figure, 4 million people would be affected with dyspraxia. So this could be your cousin, your friend, your auntie, your uncle, your work colleagues, your partner, your niece, your milkman, your MP, your doctor, your uncle's cousin, your friend's auntie, etc. Now, I'm being a bit pedantic, but that to me is a significant figure. Now, imagine 4 million people in a room. That would be a very, very, very big room. That would be like a large stadium. But large stadiums can hold up to, let's say, 90,000 people. So that's like a lot of large stadiums. I mean, this would be more like a large city or a country. I mean, isn't 4 million people not the entire population of Wales? The point is that that's a lot of people. So dyspraxia is important, and partially this is because it affects a lot of people. And this to me follows the logical conclusion that we need to look at education and work and consider it through the dyspraxia perspective. Now, I made a video years ago, and I believe it was called Dyspraxia and the Secret. And the premise to this video is that people with dyspraxia struggle to understand social cues and therefore struggle with social interaction. And now some people with dyspraxia clearly don't suffer with social interaction. I mean, loquacious Laura, she has great linguistic intelligence. Yes, she has dyspraxia, but she also has social eloquence, linguistic intelligence, so it's not an issue for her. But unfortunately, it was an issue for me, and that's why I spoke my truth. So this truth about dyspraxia and the secret was a subjective truth as opposed to an objective truth. So let me explain this premise with 4 questions, and these 4 questions would be the following. What are the social cues? Are they taught in society? Are they taught in education? Are they taught in the family? And are they taught in the community? Now, assuming that all or most of those questions, if the answer is no, then this would embrace this idea that people with dyspraxia struggle with understanding social cues, not only because of their condition, but also because of their environment that doesn't explain this condition. I hope that makes sense. And I think it's important here that maybe we break down the 4 social cues, which are the following. Let's break it down into phases. So phase 1 is facial expressions, phase 2 is body language, phase 3 is voice pitch and tone, and phase 4 is personal space. So nearly all social interactions, I would argue, involve these 4 elements. And admittedly, I struggle in this area. And I believe that there are a lot of people that struggle in this area, but perhaps they don't have the awareness that they struggle in this area. So now let me tell you a little bit about my dyspraxia diagnosis. So I was diagnosed at university, and this is when I was doing my first degree. And I was assessed by an educational psychologist. Now, one of the issues presented in my report was processing information. So let's focus on that specific element, processing information. And to understand this, let me break it down in layman terms and give a light-hearted example. So when people say disrespectful things to me, it takes me about 24 hours to process the disrespectful intention. And this has created some issues because it's harder to challenge someone retrospectively than in the moment. Think about that. It is harder to challenge someone retrospectively than in the moment. So let's give an example. So John, remember when you laughed when you said that I have no discernible skills 24 hours ago in the office corridor when I was talking to Charlie about the weather? Well, I have only now processed that you were being disrespectful. So as you can see, this processing issue can hinder social interactions because I should have told him to then as opposed to now, 24 hours later. Anyway, processing is an important part of human evolution. Let me explain, bear with me. Because processing a situation can be seen as understanding information. Now, years ago, in the jungle, we processed information to understand the danger from lions and tigers, particularly at night times, because our vision was compromised. This is why we used fire to see our enemies in the night. We processed the situation, we identified the problem, and then we came up with the solution. I say we. I individually had no involvement in the millions of years of evolution concerning Homo sapiens, but hopefully You get the point. Anyway, my dyspraxia diagnosis, it was a label, but the specific report was an insight from an educational psychologist. And in this society, this would be considered an educated opinion, an opinion of validation. Now, of course, we can question all of those premises. What is an educated opinion? How do we qualify an opinion of validation? Can an educated opinion be wrong? But for me, this was a starting point. And that starting point was to understand myself on a deeper level, to see my shadows. And of course, I mean that in a metaphorical context. So, in exploring dyspraxia, one of the questions I had was, what are the benefits of dyspraxia, or are there any benefits of dyspraxia? And in my book, I feel that one of the benefits of dyspraxia is creativity. Now, little side note here, when I think about creativity, I think John Cleese, the writer, the comedian who wrote a book on creativity and would be considered one of the great creative minds in the world. But I digress. Now, there are a few questions here. Why are people with dyspraxia more creative? But the first question would surely be, what is creativity? Which is the use of imagination, of original ideas to create something. So let's stick with this as a premise, and let's give some examples. So you take a pencil and then you draw a face with 8 eyes, and this could be considered creative. And let's say now you draw a human body with a light bulb head. This could be considered creative. A film that begins at the end and then ends at the beginning could be considered creative. The creative mind can go to many different places. The house of creativity has an unlimited amount of doors. But there's still a question to answer here. Why would people with dyspraxia be creative or more creative? Well, as individuals, we are all unique. Robert Greene, the author of 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, and the Laws of Human Nature, states that we all have a unique set of DNA. So I feel that dyspraxia adds another level of uniqueness to our uniqueness, meaning we are unique because of our DNA, and dyspraxia adds another level of uniqueness, and this deepens our creativity, or potentially deepens our creativity. So in this sense, we are naturally divergent in our ways of thinking. Creativity is a way of life to us, as opposed to a skill that we learn. And I think it's important. I think it's extremely important to embrace this. One of my favorite quotes is the following. Quote, "The desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of the human soul." End of quote. What a beautiful expression of the joy of creativity. And as stated previously, I urge people to open those doors. So in conclusion, we have spoken about what is dyspraxia. So we've looked at the definition of dyspraxia. Then we've talked at length about how many people have dyspraxia. Then we've spoken about dyspraxia and social interaction. And this has been defined as dyspraxia in The Secret. And in this we discussed social intelligence. And then I spoke about my dyspraxia diagnosis story, and in that we focused on processing. And then finally we spoke about dyspraxia and creativity, which I feel is one of the benefits or potential benefits of dyspraxia. And with that said, I sincerely hope you have enjoyed the video.